I never believed in the old stories, but now I wish I had. My experience on the Oregon coast shattered any lingering doubts I had about the things that lurk in the dark corners of this world. The wind had been fierce when I first arrived, howling through the cliffs, dragging the salty ocean air deep into my lungs. The coast seemed peaceful enough at first, majestic cliffs, fog rolling in, and the quiet murmur of waves crashing far below. But that peacefulness would prove to be a facade, masking a terror I never could have imagined. I had come to Oregon seeking a quiet retreat, hoping to find solace in nature's embrace. The cabin I rented was secluded, perched on the edge of a dense forest that sloped down to the jagged coastline. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and I relished the thought of being alone, away from the chaos of the world. But the first night, as I lay in bed, I felt something strange in the air. The wind outside had quieted, and for a brief moment, everything was still. Too still. I chalked it up to the isolation. Being alone in such a place can mess with your mind. But the next day, I began to notice something off. While hiking through the woods, I kept hearing something in the distance, faint, almost like whispers, but no one was there. The trees around me, ancient and gnarled, seemed to close in, their twisted branches casting long shadows that flickered unnaturally in the fading light. My footsteps were the only sound, but I swore I could hear something else, just at the edge of my hearing. A soft, eerie laughter that made the hairs on my neck stand up. That night, I decided to stay indoors, but I could still hear it, low, like a murmur, coming from somewhere deep within the woods. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but when I looked out the cabin window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. In the distance, just at the tree line, a figure stood. It wasn't clear, just a silhouette moving unnaturally, as if it were drifting rather than walking. My heart raced as I stared, frozen, too terrified to move or blink. The figure was gone by the time I dared to look again. I sought advice from a local elder the next day, hoping to get some peace of mind. She was an older woman, her skin weathered like the land itself, and her eyes held a wisdom that seemed to pierce through you. When I told her about the figure in the woods, her expression darkened, and she muttered something under her breath that I couldn't understand. "You've seen the spirit of the coast," she said, her voice grave. "The one that haunts these lands, guarding the boundaries between the world of the living and the spirits. It doesn't want you here." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I laughed it off, trying to convince myself that it was just a local legend, stories meant to keep outsiders away. But the unease in her eyes lingered, and I began to feel the weight of something watching me from the shadows. That night, the whispers came again, but this time, they were louder, almost demanding. The cabin grew colder, and despite the fire burning in the hearth, I could see my breath in the air. I ventured outside, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion, and made my way toward the woods. The fog had rolled in thick, turning everything into a gray, shifting mass of indistinct shapes. The trees loomed tall around me, their twisted branches seeming to beckon me further into the forest. And that's when I saw them. Symbols carved into the bark of several trees, strange markings that pulsed with a faint, unnatural glow. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them. My heart thudded in my chest as I traced the markings with my fingers, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread creeping over me. The whispers grew louder, now accompanied by the sound of footsteps behind me, but when I spun around, no one was there. I ran. By the time I reached the cabin, the air had turned heavy, pressing against my chest, suffocating me. The silence in the woods was deafening, the usual hum of the night gone. I bolted the door and sank to the floor, but I could still hear the laughter. Closer now, louder, as if it was right outside my window. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. It was inside my head, too. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The figure in the woods had returned, standing just beyond the tree line, watching me with eyes that gleamed like fire in the dark. The air around the cabin had grown oppressively still, and every shadow seemed to hold a secret, a promise of something more. I began to feel as though the land itself was alive, aware of me, of my presence. The next day, I went back to the elder, desperate for answers. She stared at me with pity in her eyes. "They want you to leave," she said softly. "The spirits of the coast are not welcoming to those who wander too far." But it was too late. I was already marked, the symbols on the trees, the strange figure, the whispers. They were all a warning. The more I resisted, the closer the terror crept. That night, the wind howled again, but it was no longer the wind. It was the sound of something moving, something large, something that wasn't meant to be. I ran to the beach, hoping to escape, but the ocean had become an alien landscape. The waves crashed violently, and in the distance I saw shapes moving beneath the surface, dark, hulking figures, undulating in the water like beasts. A shadow passed over me, and I looked up just in time to see something enormous soaring through the fog, wings, leathery and vast, blocking out the moon. And then I understood. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I don't know what happened after that. The fog grew thicker. The trees seemed to close in on me, and the sky above was an impenetrable darkness. I think I was marked long before I realized it, drawn here by forces far beyond my understanding. I don't know what awaits me now. Maybe something is still out there, watching, waiting. All I know is that the Oregon coast holds its secrets, and I've become part of them. Whatever happens next, I don't think I'll ever escape. The spirits of the coast don't let go easily.